For many of you out there, my AKA Padders, when we think of Ron Lim, we think of Silver Surfer, Thanos right over here, and the Infinity Gauntlet. He's one of the greatest cosmic Marvel artists in the entire history of the company. His rendition of Thanos is probably the greatest. And the wild part of Infinity Gauntlet is when we look back, we imagine a lot of it in Ron Lim's style. But Infinity Gauntlet actually started as a George Perez miniseries. It was almost like a George Perez showcase. He couldn't finish it. And we get one of the all-time covers, but also one of the all-time finishes. And today, this is the beginning of a really giant, true deep dive on the career of Ron Lim. We're going to be doing this throughout 2025. Today, I want to showcase Nowhere to Escape Grips. Silver Comics, Chris Silver, if you guys aren't familiar with him. He's one of the great independent publishers of all time. Ron Lim's potentially earliest published work is in this edition. And that's the way we're going to start. So going into 2025, we're going to go from the absolute independence to the height of Ron Lim's career, starting today with a very big basic question about Image Comics. Why isn't Ron Lim discussed? When we speak of Image Comics, where was he? Let's go. And here we go. Finally, this is one of the reasons why, to me, this channel means a lot. Because I know I get into the crevices and the veins and the cracks of American comics, the American comic book industry, that a lot of other YouTubers and commentators and wannabe historians don't touch. And the reason why they don't touch is because they don't spend enough time with the material. This year, I think this channel was defined as a reader channel, not a collector channel. Myself and the collecting world, we'll call it, because I don't like saying community. I just think that's code word for BS. There's readers and collectors right now. And dare I say, the collectors have dominated everything. Readers and reader channels really go nowhere. And the reason for that is the collecting part of it all. It's just so much more. There's more meat on that bone just when it comes to like sensational topics, quick clickbaity type things. Like for example, like my clickbait would be Rob Liefeld lies, and like that doesn't, it's not broad enough. But with all of that, we do a lot of 90s comics on this channel. And today we're doing Ron Lim. This is the beginning of a deep dive of Ron Lim. Now, part of this, you guys know, I got rid of my entire 20 long box comic book collection years ago. And I slowly have been rebuilding it with the intent of bringing everything I buy and purchase to you guys. So, we've done a pretty good job with that. That's what Wildstorm Wednesday and Top Cow Tuesday. We have upcoming Malibu Monday. We have Valiant Days coming. Yes, we're going to go into Rob Liefeld's Extreme Studios. A lot of these themed days or series are just we're going to start rolling them out. We're stockpiling a ton of them. But we're mostly, we like to focus on 90s comics. The most transformative time in American comic books. In my view, the greatest era of American comic books, and in some ways, the absolute end of American comic books. Just when it comes to continuity and storylines, the 90s put like an end cap on a lot of the icons. Green Lantern, Superman, even the Marvel Universe effectively ends with Onslaught. With all of that babbling, Image Comics gets this like focus, and that's mostly because Rob Liefeld, Todd McFarlane, and Jim Lee are kind of like still in the comic book sphere, even though Jim Lee effectively is just a executive. Todd McFarlane is a pitch guy for a company that he sold all the stakes to. And then Rob Liefeld is a desperate revisionist when it comes to his Robservations podcast. All of these things keep them in the spotlight. But what about the individuals that potentially outfoxed Image Comics? And that's the beginning of this Ron Lim deep dive. Ron Lim. He has drawn the greatest Silver Surfer in comic book history. Ron Lim, here's the wild thing, comes in post George Perez not being able to finish the Infinity Gauntlet. And then from there on, takes over Infinity Gauntlet. Technically, it is considered a Infinity Gauntlet artist, even though George Perez did a bulk of the work and some, that iconic cover one. But we look at Ron Lim as a Infinity Gauntlet artist. Ron Lim has drawn the greatest version of Thanos in comic book history. Ron Lim is the greatest cosmic Marvel comic book artist. Clearly, he must have been in this conversation to join Image, because originally, right, like let's just tap on the history, tap. Originally, Tom McFarlane wanted to form a comic book union, which proves how much of a communist Tom McFarlane really is. He wants to form a union, and through that, Rob Liefeld, almost like sidebar, but a little bit parallel, says, well, I just want to draw my own comic and publish it. So he solicits executioners and gets a cease and desist from Marvel Comics, and then therein lies this coagulation. Todd McFarlane's union and Rob Liefeld's desire to publish his own comic book forms the concept of what Image Comics could be. Rob Liefeld, brilliantly, back in the day, because he only had a few years, Rob Liefeld, flash of genius. Absolute definition of flash of genius. He brilliantly designs the Image Eye. They comes up with Image Comics, comes up with the branding, and then the future attitude of what that company represented, because it doesn't represent it now. We get Image Comics. So we get this somewhat of a revisionist story where they say if we only had Jim Lee, if we could get Jim Lee, Marvel's golden boy, we would be locked in. And from that point on, when Jim Lee got locked in, because Jim Lee left to potentially build, Jim Lee saw an opportunity to build credibility and cash flow. He saw what the other numbers of the other Image Comics were doing, and he says, well, that could just be more money for me. That's money and resources I can use and reinvest, eventually building Wildstorm Productions through Homage Studios, but become an industry player, which he did, because he nearly took over Marvel Comics and later had to sell to DC Comics to bail himself out of debt because he lost and spent all of his money on the Gen 13 animated movie. But we have the building, getting back to it, we have the building of Image Comics. So we have Eric Larson, Jim Valentino, Todd McFarlane originally, supposedly, nixed it. Rob Liefeld said, look, this is Image is about what we're doing. We have to let Valentino in. We all know, just based on the artwork, aka patterns, Jim Valentino didn't qualify for Image Comics. Dale Keown later did. St. Keith, who was a Jim Lee pickup, later did. The later waves of Image Comics, yes, but either way, we love Shadowhawk as a character, so that does prove Rob Liefeld's position to allow him in. All of this stuff, we're getting to the point, right? Stick with me, guys. We're going to land. We're going to land this airplane. We know that they must have gone to Ron Lim. But Ron Lim says no. Ron Lim, through his cosmic work, does a stellar run of X-Men 2099. He does good work on Spider-Man Unlimited. He is still drawing Marvel comic books today. He's gone into some of the independent books, some other startups, but has been a relative Marvel comic book mainstay since the pre-Image days. Now, we can't say the same for Eric Larson, Rob Liefeld, Mark Silvestri. Not saying that they haven't returned and have had big projects with those companies, but they're not considered a mainstay. They're not considered a consistent workhorse, cranking out pages, figuring out the paneling, but being overall productive and a magnificent golden clog in that company. But Ron Lim is. Here's the thing. Here's the theory. And we're going to get into the very first thing I can remember Ron Lim ever doing, which was a recent discovery. Ron Lim's very first, we're going to get into it. Because Ron Lim has deep-seated roots, as so many Image guys does, Eric Larson, Rob Liefeld, but Jim Valentino, deep-seated roots in true black and white American independent comics. He rose from complete obscurity to effectively draw the biggest storyline in Marvel comic book history, which would be the Infinity Gauntlet. I say it's bigger because it's made its way to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Once Onslaught does that, we'll give that title to Onslaught as a loyalty reward, as maybe a unspoken editorial mandate that has now been continued from editor-in-chief to editor-in-chief. Ron Lim gets rewarded. Ron Lim gets work. Ron Lim is on that short list of people to hit up. All because he didn't join Image Comics. So, starting our Ron Lim deep dive, let's get into Ron Lim and Grips. And there it is, my AK Padders. Let's just open this up to some Ron Lim. I mean, isn't it amazing? He even draws what could be the worst Thor gimmick of all time, which is the silver mask. But he even draws it to the level of you would buy this as an action figure. So we're going to keep that open there. Let's put some coffee on that page. Chris Silver. I would like to also profile. We preview a lot on this channel. I would like to profile Chris Silver's entire publishing empire. He is famous for Grips. They've done a lot of books, a lot of good stuff, and a lot of high-level talent came up through this company, Greater Mercury Comics. This is a tough-to-find trade paperback of Grips. We will profile every single page of this on this channel. It's going to be an extended episode. But if you're not familiar with Grips, it's got Rick Veitch, who's still rocking and rolling to this day. First visual conception drawn by Ron Lim. And this is Ron. I mean, look how amateur this is. It's like perfectly amateur. Aren't these pages wild? I mean, I was in awe. I had no idea that anything this early existed. And it's a beat 'em up. It's a beat 'em up pitch. Who is Grips? Find out sometime in early 1986. Grips, the comic. I'm sorry. Timothy Vigil. I may have got that name wrong. Created and written by Chris Silver, but Ron Lim was essentially the pitch guy. Chris Silver writer, Ron Lim artist. They raise hell just for the fun of it, like now. So they think, but I have to be sure they attack, and soon they have, so now. Very amateur. I wish I could say there's shades of the future Ron Lim. Maybe a little bit in this profile. Not even so much in the pose right here. But how wild is that? This literally blew my mind. I got this from a used book shop in Philly. How much did I pay for it? $10. This right here has a little bit more of the Ron Lim, but fantastic cover. Right? We put all the attention on the cover. Let me get some preview pages. There it is, the beginning of Ron Lim. The guy that should have been a part of Image Comics. That's 100% truth.